Good morning everybody, it's Vapix here, and today we are going to have an in-depth look at Warpforge. We are going to go through every keyword, every change from Legions, and look at all the different features of Warpforge so you guys can get up to speed and aren't confused with a bunch of the changes that happen. Now, a lot of these you'll be able to pick up just from playing, but the beta is, or the alpha, sorry, is not a pre-alpha actually, is not even out for everybody yet, so I thought I would make this video and get it out before it's out for everybody, which I think I'll get it out just before that happens. So this should be out just before everybody is able to play the pre-alpha. Now, we're going to go through all of the new keywords, and we're going to compare them to Legions, which most of you watching this video would have played. If you haven't, I do apologize, but I will explain what they do in their own terms anyways. Just for the people who do play Legions, you should be able to have a greater understanding through that of using those effects before, or if you've played any other card game with similar effects. Alright, first up, let's look at a basic card. The first thing you'll notice as a change from Legions is two different attack values in the bottom left hand corner, and we'll get to that. So first, let's go through the easy stuff. In the top right hand corner there is the energy cost. This is the same as the Horus Heresy Legions. It costs 4 to play this card. You get you get 2 energy on turn 1, and then it goes 1 up from there. So exactly the same as Legions. Same with the health points in the bottom right hand corner there. You have 5 health every time it takes damage. This goes down. This does not heal at the end of every turn or anything like that. It has 5 damage over the course of the game, and it will die. Of course, you can heal, but that's that. The other effect there is the melee attack and the ranged attack in the bottom left hand corner. So you can see it has 4 melee attack and 3 ranged attack. When you decide to attack with a unit, you decide whether you want to attack with melee or ranged against another unit, and they will retaliate with that stat. So if you have 4 melee attack and they only have 1, you're dealing 4 damage, they're going to deal 1 to you. But the other way works around as well. If they've got 1 ranged attack and you have 5 ranged attack and you choose to attack with range, you'll deal 5 and you will only take 1. The attacker gets to choose what you fight with. There are ways to get around this. One of the other really big changes they've made from this game over Legions is how Warlords work. So here you see Marius Calgar. He's an Ultramarine. He's got 2 ranged attack, 2 melee attack, and 40 health. Now he also has this effect called Talent. Now, Talent replaces cards' abilities, it seems, within this game. I have not seen a single card on the field that actually has an activated ability. They are all like automatic triggers based off other things. The way they're doing activated abilities is they are changing them to Talent. Now, at the start of your turn, you create a card in your hand. So, for instance, Marius Calgar has Talent, Master Tactician. So, at the beginning of your turn, you create Master Tactician, which is pay 2 energy, draw a card. So instead of Horus from the Horus Heresy Legions, you pay 2 and you draw a card. You're using your Warlord's ability to do that, ability to act. Now with this, you can draw a card and still attack with Marius Calgar, which is insane. Now, Warlords aren't the only type of cards with talent. There are other ones, just like in Legions, there are cards with abilities, and they all have talent. So like a 10-drop could be a 10-10 with Talent, so you can attack with a 10-10 and use its ability in the same turn, which is insane. Now, all the talents have this other ability called Ephemeral. Now, Ephemeral is just so it's not stupid and you don't fill your hand with draw cards. At the end of turn, it's discarded from your hand. This is with every single talent that is created that we've seen so far. At the end of your turn, they're all discarded. As a side note, like Legions, the max hand size in this game is 10. When you draw above 10, I'm pretty sure you just don't get those cards, like in Legions. The next few things that I'd like to talk about is these 4 effects on your screen now. Rally, Flank, Fast, and Backlash. For people who have played Legions, these effects have not changed. Rally still gets an effect when it's played from hand. Flank is a unit can attack an enemy troop the same turn as into play. Fast is it can attack the same turn, so it can attack the enemy warlord, and backlash is trigger the effect when the unit dies. So these effects are the same, and they are on a couple of different cards, and they do the exact same thing as Legions. So now we are going to go through the rest of the effects in alphabetical order. First up is Armor. Armor is when the unit receives damage, reduce it by X to a minimum of 1. So as you can see, the Centurion has Armor 2. So if it takes 1 point of damage, it'll still take 1. If it takes a hit for 5 damage, it's only going to take 3. So it's only going to be reduced to a minimum of 1, but by X. So this has armor 2, there is armor 1, and I think there's a unit with like armor 4. So yeah, it's quite a cool effect. It's different from Legions, and I like it. I think it's a cool ability to have on certain cards to make them tankier from a lot of small hits, so you can't just trade 3 small units into 1 big unit. You really have to do something to try and get rid of it, and I kind of like that. When this thing lands, it's going to be really, really powerful. The next ability is Blast. So Blast triggers when you do a ranged attack. So not a melee attack, it has to specifically be a ranged attack, and you have to be the one attacking. You can't be attacked with a ranged attack and have this trigger. You have to be the one attacking. But when you do attack, you do X damage to the adjacent units of the target. So for instance, Hellblaster here has 3 ranged attack, but he'll hit the adjacent targets for 2 damage. Now this is like Cleave, but only specifically for range. So it's pretty cool. It is exactly like Cleave for range, now that I think about it, because Cleave has different effects to, like you have Cleave 1, 2, and 3, but your attack might be 1, and you might have Cleave 3. Exactly the same result, but it specifically has to be a ranged attack. Our third ability is Blind. When a unit is blind, it cannot perform ranged attacks. Now, this only means initiate. If a unit is blind, and you shoot it with 2 ranged attack, it will still retaliate with whatever its ranged attack is. As you can see here, this Infiltrator has Rally, give blind to an enemy unit until your next turn. So it's good if something has 1 melee attack and 5 ranged attack, you can make it so it doesn't shoot for a lot of ranged attack. This ability very much complements another ability called Vanguard, which we will go through later, and when we're at Vanguard, I will refer back to Blind. We're finally out of the Bs and onto the Cs. The next ability is Camouflage. So a Camouflage unit cannot be targeted by entity stratagems. A stratagem, by the way, is a tactic from Legions until it attacks. So a stratagem is like a non-troop card, right? So this is effectively ward from Legions. You can't target it with things from hand, right? I'm pretty sure you can still target this thing with rallied effects. So if a card has rally, deal 2 damage, that effect will be able to hit this card even though it is camouflage, because a troop that has rally, deal an effect is not a stratagem. I haven't been able to test this because I've only been able to fight bots so far, and it's very hard to line that up. But we will see when the game comes out. I expect that rally effects off troops or infantry or whatever will be able to target through camouflage. So it is less powerful than ward, especially how it goes away after you attack. That's what stealth does. After you attack, it happens. Now, after you attack does go for ranged or melee. So after it does any of those, you will lose camouflage. This ability is probably my favorite new ability from Warpforge. It is Codex. Do an effect when you spend all your energy. Now, this triggers when you play it. So this Impulsor here, if you play it on 5 energy, you get the Codex effect. And also on other turns. So if I play this on 5 energy, I get a Primaris Intercessor on the field. Then next turn, when I play something and use all my 6 energy, whether it's with 1 6-drop or with a 5-drop and a 1-drop or whatever, as long as you spend all your energy, it will trigger again, which I think is insane, the fact you get it when you play it and on the other turns as well. It is a very, very powerful effect, and there are multiple cards with this effect with different rewards for getting the Codex ability off. This one deploys another troop, which is very, very strong. This next effect is functionally the same as Stun from Legions. It is Concussive. When this unit attacks, its target can't attack on its next turn. So it's an ability your troop or warlord gets that when you attack something either with a ranged attack or a melee attack, that unit, so warlord or troop, cannot attack back with ranged or melee, so both. So if you attack with melee, it can't respond with either of them. Now, the thing about Concussive and why it's different to Stun is the fact that Talent is the thing that I have described earlier. The card's ability, its activated ability, is generated into hand. That card will still be generated, and they will effectively still be able to use the ability of the troop, even though the troop can't attack that turn. So on board, it is basically Stun, but it is not as strong because of how they've changed the mechanics within this game. I still think it's worth doing because a lot of times you can usually maybe give a 1-1 Concussive and attack into something that's a 10-10, and then that unit just can't act, and that's pretty good. But it's not as strong as you think because of Talent. Now, there aren't that many troops with Talent, but the Talent effects that those troops have are usually very, very strong. Our next ability is Flying. Flying states cannot be targeted with melee attacks. So a unit with Flying has to be shot with a ranged attack. Now, when it says it can't be targeted with melee attacks, the Flying unit will still take backlash damage if you attack with a melee attack or a ranged attack, but it just can't be targeted with them. It cannot be, someone else cannot initiate a melee attack against a unit with Flying, which is quite good if you can protect it in the air, but a few of the units we've seen with Flying have less ranged attack than they do melee attack. So the way you want to be killing them is with ranged attack anyways. I'm really interested to see if they bring out a unit that's like 1 melee attack and 10 ranged attack and has Flying, so it's really hard to deal with, but we shall see. Now we have a brand new ability, Invulnerable. This unit cannot be damaged or destroyed. Now this says unit, which does imply your warlord can get this. Notice how Invulnerable as well is not until end of turn. It is static. Now I assume the cards that give it will say Invulnerable until end turn or until your next turn or whatever. But this Invulnerable does imply it can go onto your warlord, which will be really cool. Now, the only way we have at the moment to generate this is off this 9-drop Ultramarines card, the Captain Sicarus, and it's his talent. So you have to play this, and then on your next turn, you get his ability, his talent, the Greatest Deed, which is pay 3, give Invulnerable to a friendly troop this turn. So it can't go on the Warlord from this source, but Invulnerable can go on a unit. So maybe eventually we will see Invulnerable that can go on your Warlord, which could be really clutch in certain situations. I'm sure it'll cost a lot in order to be able to do this, but it is what it is. Invulnerable, this is the only source within the alpha at the moment. Seems very powerful. I'm keen to see it in the future. Now we have a very orcish ability, Mob. Mob triggers an effect after another friendly unit does a melee attack. So a troop or unit, I guess, has the Mob effect. It's kind of like Pack from Legions. After they attack, you get this effect. Now, it's specifically a melee attack, so you will not get this effect if your units do ranged attacks, but otherwise, it's the exact same as Pack from Legions. There are a couple cards within the Orc faction that have Mob. So this next effect is Pindown. This unit cannot do melee attacks. So this is the other side of the blind effect, blind stopping ranged, Pindown stopping melee. Now this is when your unit has Pindown, it triggers that. So there are a lot of units that give your enemy units Pindown, like this Ultramarine here, Codex, which if you remember is spend all your energy in that turn. A random enemy unit is pinned until your next turn, which is quite good. So this can be used in a combination with a lot of things. So if you're facing the orcs and an orc enemy has 5 attack and 1 ranged attack, so 5 melee attack, then you can pin it so it can't use that melee attack, effectively stunting it for that turn. So I think it's situational. This next effect is Sniper. When doing a ranged attack, enemies killed don't retaliate. This is incredibly similar to the effect from Custodes from Legions, which is First Strike. So when they kill a thing, it doesn't hit back. Now you specifically have to attack with a ranged attack, not a melee attack, but that's okay because the cards that usually have this are going to have high ranged attack and not very high melee attack. I think it's a very good effect, and I'm keen to see it on more cards. Our next effect, Tide. When this card is played from hand, you can play it again up to X times this turn. This is very similar to Reflection, only it is limited. So for instance, this Grot here, it's a 1-drop with Tide 1. So when you play it, you get another copy in hand. Now that copy will not trigger Tide unless the Tide was bigger. So there is cards with Tide 2. So you play the first one, you get 1 in hand. Then you play the second one, then you get 1 in hand. Then when you play the third one, you do not get another one in hand. So for this Grot, you play 1, you get a Grot in hand, then you play that. Now with the Tide, when you play 1 card, you don't immediately get the other 2 in hand, you only get 1 in hand. And those cards effectively have Ethereal, which is at the end of your turn, you discard them. So you can't just play this, get 1 in hand, and play it again next turn. It has to be that turn. Our next effect is Unstable. Unstable is a negative effect. When this unit dies, it has a 50% chance of dealing 1 to 3 damage to adjacent units. This is very similar to Backlash, only Backlash happens 100% of the time. This will only happen half the time. This only is on Orc vehicles at the moment, so they're unstable. Well, they've been built by the Orc. They might blow up when they get destroyed. So I guess that's the lore reasons behind it, and I think it is very fun. Now, I don't think it's too bad of an effect, because at the end of the day, It's only 1 to 3 damage, which is not a lot. You could just hit the 1. It's a 1 in 3 chance. And it's a 50% chance of it happening at all. So yeah, it's a negative effect, but I really don't think it's that much of a problem. It's more thematic than I think impactful within the game. And now onto a last new ability, Vanguard. Your other units cannot be targeted with melee attacks. So this is something a friendly unit has, and it is effectively frontline from legions where your other units cannot be attacked. Now it is specific to melee attacks. So this Assault Centurion has Vanguard, so you can only hit this with melee attacks. Every one of your other units is protected, but specifically from melee attacks. If they have a couple of things that have high ranged attack, they are able to ignore the Vanguard effect, but only for the ranged attacks. Flying does not get over it as well. Only ranged attacks can get around it, which is very, very interesting. I would have thought Vanguard would have stopped ranged and melee, but flying could have gone over it. But that's how it is. That's fine. So you can get around this by just having a bunch of ranged units. If you've got a bunch of ranged units, you really don't care if they've got any Vanguard things, but it could stifle you in very certain ways, especially when Ultramarines have cards that say -2 range to everything on the field until your next turn. So you can very much combo it around, I think, which will be very, very nice. Not to mention, a lot of the orcs are more about melee attacks, and this pre-alpha is definitely about orcs versus Ultramarines. So it could be very good in that case. Not really against other Ultramarines because they have more higher ranged attack troops rather than the melee attacks. But yeah, Vanguard is definitely very interesting. It's obviously not as powerful as Frontlines from Legions because Frontline stops all the attacks. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. It's a cool way to distinguish between the ranged attack and the melee attack builds of different decks. I'm sure once we get into the different metas that this game is going to get into, it's going to be much more interesting, which would be very, very cool. There'll be like melee metas where Vanguard will come in. There'll be ranged metas where nobody's playing any Vanguard things. Now, I did mention I wanted to come back to blind. Since blind stops ranged attacks, if they have something that you don't want to hit you and you have a Vanguard field on thing, if you have blind, it effectively stops them from using it because blind stops the ranged attacks. So that's where it combos in here and why I think blind will be very powerful in certain situations. Anyways, guys, that is all of the new effects and changes that I can think of within this game. So please, please, please comment down any questions you have for me. I will try and respond to them as soon as possible. This pre-alpha should be out pretty soon after this video goes out. I'm recording it. It's 4 p.m. tonight for me on the 2nd. I am ahead of most of the world being in Australia, so it'll probably be maybe another 24 hours or so, maybe a little more than that, until the pre-alpha is out for everybody. So please, any questions, I will try and answer them as soon as I can. Otherwise, I have uploaded my stream of this game that I spent an hour and a half on last night straight to YouTube, so you can check it out there and see any interactions. And if you want to play when I'm playing, I will send out messages in my Discord when I am on playing Warpforge, so maybe we can match up in this alpha, and I am excited for all of that. Anyways, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope this has helped people get more of a handle on the changes from Legions, or if you haven't played Legions, a good sense of a lot of these effects. Now, if you've played other card games, I'm sure it'll come very naturally. But yeah, hopefully this eliminates a lot of the confusion going into this game and people can have a lot of fun. So I hope you guys all have a great afternoon, night, day, whatever it is from you, and I will see you next time. Bye!